Daniel Meyer, I'm music director of the Erie Philharmonic, and it is a great pleasure to be with two of our principal woodwind musicians of the Erie Philharmonic. I'm talking to Danna Sundet, principal oboe, and Laura Koepke, principal bassoon of the Philharmonic. And why don't we just start with a little bit of introduction. Danna, where in the world are you? It looks like you've got some bookcases behind you. Is that your workstation?
It is. This is my home studio, and as you saw in one of the little videos that we posted, my husband is a great carpenter as well as a trumpet player, and he built my office for me because for so many years, you know, oboe players are so geeky, and we make reeds in our workstations. We usually purchase them from Goodwill, and I had the same desk that I'd had since I was a freshman in college and I love LPs. All of these cabinets are full of LPs. I listen to them every day. And so he built this for me. It's my homework.
I see some fishing tackle boxes too. Are big into fishing?
Well, we are actually, but these are all reed making supplies.
Oh, very cool. And how about you, Laura? Are you home in New York?
Yeah, I'm at home in Fredonia. I tend to Zoom at in various rooms of my house, depending on what other people are doing. So I'm sequestered upstairs.
Yeah, sometimes that's the trick, is just to find a quiet spot where you can actually shut the door and
Right.
noise won't filter in, so you can stay
Exactly.
kind of connected. Laura, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing. I know you had to wrap up an academic year at SUNY Fredonia, so you obviously had some students to work with. Can you tell us a little bit about how that finished up and what you've been into at the beginning of the summer?
Well, it was quite a stressful second half of the semester. I'm sure Dana went through the same thing, but my students were great. I taught through Zoom and FaceTime. Also had my students send recordings, and we would evaluate them. I would evaluate them, and then we'd go over them together. The semester ended a couple of weeks ago. I do some administrative work at school, so I'll be still doing things all summer, which is a good thing. I have to say, teaching really kept me grounded throughout all of this. But we have been doing some gardening and house projects, and that's been nice to catch up on things that we've neglected. We did adopt a dog. That was the big event about a month ago, so that's been amazing.
Is
An
it a
adventure.
puppy?
No, she's about 4 years old, and we have a dog who's 11. So we have two now, and it's been wonderful for our teenage sons and my husband and myself.
Are the dogs getting along?
They are. At first it was a little rough, but they get along very well. They're two peas in a pod, and we walk them together, and sometimes the older one will let the younger one know who's boss, but other than that, they're great.
How about you, Dana? What have you been up to? I know you had a semester to finish up as well.
Oh yes, oh boy. Like Laura, we've been teaching online and a lot of faculty meetings. Kent State was virtually, you know, we closed down really soon, right after Ohio State closed down. And so it wasn't adjacent to our spring break. So we were given 3 days and a weekend to figure out what we were going to do. So I'm a cyclist. I love riding my bike. And so I loved faculty meetings, Laura. It was awesome. I would spin on the bike downstairs, and I would average 22 miles for every faculty meeting. It was so great. So I got a good workout in, and you know, I've been riding my bike a lot, and I gardening like Laura. And we just made this really cool garden that we premiered it yesterday, where we have a top on it, opens like a huge grill with the white cloth that goes around that protects the bunnies and the, you know, deer from getting it. And so I'm really excited about that.
So what sorts of things did you plant? Do you have vegetables and flowers and all sorts of things?
Oh yeah, I love the flowers. In this particular garden, I've got let's see, kale, and I've got cilantro and some lettuces, arugula, which is one of my favorites, and squashes and tomatoes. So yeah.
Oh, you're going
What
to have a
about
great
you?
harvest.
Yeah, what about you, Daniel? What are
You
you
know,
doing?
we're urbanites, so we're doing as much of an urban garden as we can, mostly flowers, I would say. And so we've got our entire back deck pretty much covered with flowers and flower pots right now. Some of them are blooming, some of them are still just big pots of dirt. We also have some wonderful tomato plants making their way up too. So I'm really excited about that because I love to cook and I love to cook Italian food. So tomatoes are a big part of that. And yeah, it's very similar. I mean, we're spending a lot of time just doing things to that. We moved to this house about a year and a half ago now. And we're just now finally getting things settled and put in the way that we want them to, because essentially when we moved right at the beginning of the season. And as you both know, all bets are off. I mean, you don't dare undertake any major projects starting in September because there's just virtually no time, because the whole week is taken with activity. And then of course the weekends is music making and concertizing. So it's folly to try to embark on any big projects, in the fall. And we just got into the routine of our lives as busy musicians and music administrators, and just don't have the time to do it. So this, I mean, I guess one positive that's come out of this is, of course, having that opportunity to take care of the homestead. But it's also really nice being around each other a lot, and particularly our 6-year-old son. He just graduated from kindergarten, and I get to see him much more than I ever would, and get to discover the way that he sees the world and understands the world. And it's so funny because he'll sit with us at the dinner table and he'll just join in the conversation. We could be talking about something that's we would think could be way above his pay grade, as it were, as a 6-year-old, but he has some really funny observations, and really understands the clues that we're giving when we talk. So we have to kind of be careful. But it's a thrill. It's fun, and something that, of course, I guess if you want to count blessings out of something that's very difficult for a lot of people, that certainly would be one of them. Tell me about your routines in terms of performers. I mean, do you both have warm-up routines that start at the beginning of the day and then happen through, you kind of connect back with your instrument throughout the day, or how has this affected your regular routines with your instruments?
I'll let you go first, Laura.
Well, in normal life, I don't have a regular schedule. Every day's rather chaotic, so I will do a warm up depending on how much time I have or what time of day it is. I'll warm up differently before performance versus first thing in the morning, or sometimes there's just no time, so it's between lessons. I'm so used to that sort of schedule that having all this downtime is really hard for me. This unscheduled time is really hard. So my plan for the summer is just to keep my musical fitness, keep myself in shape. I'm having a hard time making plans or staying motivated because I don't know what the next project will be, or when we'll be playing again. It's we're all experiencing this, and it's very challenging. So my goal is really just to stay in shape, get back into my etudes and scales, but I'm also really aware of how busy I was now, and I'm trying to reevaluate all of that, and hopefully as we move forward I can have a better balance.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Dana?
My typical routine is exercise early in the morning, and then I warm up pretty quickly, like in 20 minutes before I head out to school, and then spend a day of teaching. But what I discovered is in my teaching face-to-face, how much I play with the students and demonstrate. And so the online teaching, I found that I was getting out of shape because you're spending most of the time listening to them, and according to their internet connection or whatever, they don't sound very good online. I mean, let's face it, the computer is meant for the human voice and not for a musical instrument. And so I'm teaching, I'm doing mostly listening and evaluating and trying to humble myself and give examples as much as I can, knowing that I'm sounding as bad as they are sounding me. So I felt like I was really getting out of shape and a little bit discouraged in that fashion. So I just, started a routine where I open books. I have one on my stand, and I'm breaking the binding almost, because I'll force myself to learn a page and then turn it over and turn it over until I can get through the 2 or 3 etude books that are on my stand. And like Laura, I mean, playing real music, of Bach and duets with my friends. I have been playing duet with one of my fabulous friends in Europe who's a recording engineer, and he and I went to school together. And he's been practicing so much these days because he's not able to record much at the Concertgebouw. And so, he sounds better than I do. And he hasn't played the oboe very much in 30 years, so it's really got me to evaluating. I've tried really hard to use a cappella, and that chamber concert that Laura and I were going to play on, I've tried to record this really hard trio with Mark Adelman and Beth Eder, but it's difficult because some of those apps don't work if you don't have an iPhone or this or that. So I have been playing duets on using a cappella with those people who have iPhones.
And then, of course, as reed players, there's the whole world of reed making. And I know that when you're in the rhythm of performing concerts, you have to keep up on your reed making, and I'm sure you kind of prioritize which one you're going to use for which concert, and maybe even down to the piece or the movement of a piece. Is that rhythm, do you still keep up with that rhythm of making reeds, or do you just simply make the ones that you need at this point?
I have not kept the same rhythm. I'm really, again, I think it's more about stress and the unknown. It's meant to really hard to be productive that way. But I do have a nice supply of reeds, so I'm feeling fine about it. I think I did place an order for more cane in anticipation of, a post-pandemic live performing life. But it's definitely different now.
Laura, can you estimate how long it would take to make a single reed for a bassoon?
It's I can't really, because and everybody will attest to this too, that the process is sort of long term. The initial making of the reed is pretty fast, actually. It doesn't take that long, maybe it's in an hour or less. But that's just the first step, and then they settle, and then we do the next step, and then I break them in. So it's and it depends. Some reeds that end up being great reeds, I'll put away. So that there may be a reed from 2 years ago that I'm playing later, if it's great for low register or high register thing. So it's hard to say. It's a lifetime adventure.
Do you have to put something like that into a humidor or something? How do you keep a reed to last that long?
Oh, I just keep those special one in a special box and keep it in my bassoon case. Dana, maybe you have more specifics.
We are so envious of bassoonists because the larger the reed, then less that the weather affects it. The weather does affect the cane. But the smaller the reed, the tips of our reed is as thin as the human hair. And so our reeds change daily. And yes, I've continued that routine of making reeds pretty often, just because when I do my warm-ups every day, the first thing I do is choose a nice reed. And if whatever the weather's doing outside is fading this great yesterday, it doesn't sound good today, then I just go back to making some more. So I've been making reeds, and we can't really put them away long term. If we keep them very thick, we can. So when I play a music festival in Washington State, I will make a bunch of blanks and then finish them wherever I am. That really works for us. But if you try to finish them and if it sounds great today, there's no guarantee it'll sound good tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
How really good sounding oboe reed last you? I mean, can you get through an entire concert on one reed or two weeks worth, or?
So this is an interesting topic, and not that you want to be too geeky into the reed making, but the human saliva has enzymes in it. Basically, you put it in your mouth, it starts digesting it as food. And so the Arondodonax is a grass. It's a tall grass, and it's the same for all reed instruments. It's the same plant. It's just that bassoon cane is very large, and ours is very tiny, the cane. And so there's pectin in that plant that's a sugar, and so your saliva starts digesting that sugar right away. So for some oboists, we call it magic spit if their reeds last a long time. But for my reeds, especially when I was playing with the Cleveland Opera and the Cleveland Ballet, and we were doing 8 ballets a week, I time my reeds last 6 hours max if it's a really good reed. So yes, like Laura, if I've got a really nice Brahms reed or Beethoven reed, we'll change reeds in the course of a concert if I need to. But usually I'll try to play maybe one reed for a violin or piano concerto, and then one reed for everything else on the program.
So that way you can ensure that the reed that you're using at the dress rehearsal for the piano concerto will also be the same reed that you play at the concert, roughly speaking?
Yes, and that's another story, because if we've got a great read at the beginning of the week, we just pray to God that it lasts until the concert. So sometimes you'll see us switching around so that we can save that magic read for the end of the week.
Laura, is that similar for bassoon? I mean, are you able to get one reed's worth for one concert?
Sometimes, really depends, but I think that our audience would get a kick out of seeing Dana's row and my row, or the double reeds anyway. I know for me, I will keep 3 reeds soaking near my stand, even though I have a great reed for the concert. There's always that fear it'll die or do something unpredictable. So it's just we're just constantly thinking about it, even if everything's great, the reed's been behaving, dress rehearsal, we're good to go, I'll still have 2 or 3 in the water ready.
And I can imagine summertime is different from winter in terms of humidity and temperature. Does that have a big effect on your playing?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, the ultimate goal, as you know, is to only be thinking about the music and the creative aspect of, it's called in the flow, of what you're doing at the time. But with double reed players, there's always that little devil on your shoulder that's like, oh no, that note didn't respond. Is it going?
One thing I've always wanted to ask a double reed player is this difference between German style and French style playing. I mean, I assume it has to do with the make of the instrument and the origin of the instrument and the way that it's shaped. But some people will say, "Oh, that's definitely a French sound." I imagine both of you could sit down. If I played different oboists for you, you'd be able to identify right away what the differences are between the two. Could you both talk a little bit about what maybe the differences between those sounds and what different orchestras prefer?
I'll let you go first, Laura.
Well, my answer will be pretty simple. The French bassoon, as far as I know, is, I would say, almost extinct. Even French orchestras now are playing on German, the Heckel system or the Heckel bassoons, same in the reeds as well. You can definitely hear a French bassoon. When you hear it, you'll know if it's a bassoon. say that we're pretty unified in the bassoon world, that we're playing on German instruments and reeds.
Is that because they're easier to play, or?
I believe it's because they blend a lot more easily to the rest of the woodwind section within the orchestra. The French bassoon can play high register more easily, but the sound is just different and it's less blending.
Mm-hmm.
How are you, Dana?
For us, there's two elements. There's the reed making and the construction of the reeds, and then the instruments. So I'll try to be as brief as possible with both. So with the oboe, the different styles of reed making are, there's 5: German, French, English, Australian, and American. And so the different construction of the reeds, short, scrape, the thickness of the blade of cane itself, the thinness, that all depends on that one of those 5 styles. Now, we come from the French school, primarily in this country, the great Marcel Tabuteau. You know, back in World War I and II, the orchestras were made up of men. And so what happened was the orchestras were getting wiped out because those people were going off to war. And so they began, the orchestras, in order to survive, began bringing in these great French, and other countries too, Italian, German players. But what affected the oboe world the most was the great Marcel Tabuteau, who began teaching at the Curtis Institute. And so he's of my family lineage. John Mack studied with him, and then I studied with John Mack. And what John Mack and Marcel Tabuteau did was basically take the beautiful sounds that they were hearing from the German and the Italian and schools of players that were being imported to this country, and created a reed that combined the beautiful tone, the darkness, the warmness, the broadness of the tone. My teacher would say you have to play with broad shoulders so that it blends with the rest of the woodwind section. So in that aspect, we are direct lineage of the French school. The instruments, it's kind of interesting because we all used to play on the Lorraine French style instrument, but what's happening with the international way that we have the internet and the computers and the Spotify and all of these streaming services is that we are becoming more international. So some of those international oboe makers like Howarth and many others have come into the market. And so oboists in the United States are now, those other companies have a piece of the market. So they're playing on more instruments than the French instruments, but they're still sounding like Americans. So if you would have asked me 15 years ago, I would take a recording into my studio class of the different, Vienna and Berlin and, French. I would require the students to be able to note the difference really quickly of who was from where and what orchestra they were probably listening to. But like I said, as more international that we're becoming, that's becoming more difficult to tell.
Can you take a good instrument and make it sound like a French versus a German? In other words, modify the way that you play it to take on some of those characteristics?
Absolutely. It's in the reed making mostly.
Ah, okay. I was always under the impression that was strictly kind of the bore, the shape of the instrument, but it sounds like the reed is as much a factor, if not more so, than the instrument itself.
Absolutely. It's the reed, but if you think of the reed for both Laura and I, it's our voice. It's our vocal cords. So our training, we have heard the sounds, and it's kind of gone into our bodies and into our creative spirits. And so when we sing through our instrument, that's the voice, hopefully, that we want to hear.
But it makes a lot of sense now when you said at the beginning of the call why you used to spend so much time playing for your students. Part of that is just absorbing what your voice sounds like and how to develop a voice. And I can imagine you're trying to exhort your students to do the same thing, find their own voice through their instruments.
Correct.
Laura, how about you? Are you looking for, is there a way that you play the bassoon that would be different from in a recital, a solo recital, than from how you would play it in the orchestra? Or are you looking for a kind of a uniform sound between those two worlds?
I would definitely, in the orchestra, I'm always focused on trying to match pitch and tone and get inside the other, whoever I'm playing with, get inside their sound.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, in a recital, it would be, I'd be more focused on solo projection. But generally, I'm always looking for that resonance. And as a teacher, I'm trying to teach my students about that, finding the resonance in their sound. And what is difficult about the bassoon is actually a great feature about it as well. So it's a difficult instrument to play in tune. It's not as developed as the other woodwinds in terms of the key system and the consistency of intonation. But on the other hand, it's very free. So you'll hear a wide variety of bassoon sounds, of tones from different players. And like Danna was saying, we do have our own voice, and what's interesting is you can listen to a bassoonist play on a different bassoon, but within about 5 minutes or so, they'll sound like themselves. So it's more the player than the instrument. If the instrument's a good one. if the reed and the instrument are struggling, then no. But if all those variables are equal, the unique sound of that person will come through.
Okay, imagine I'm a 17-year-old student and I'm applying to study with you at Fredonia or at Kent. What are you listening for? What are you looking for? What would tip the scales in my favor to get a chance to study with you?
Well, I would be listening for pulse and pitch. Can you play in tune? Can you play in time? I'm definitely listening for potential more than where they are, because a lot of bassoonists start late in high school usually, or middle school, late middle school. So I'm much more interested in potential than the rep that they bring in or their exact level.
How about you,
I
Dana?
echo everything she says. It's so great. The potential is so important. As in bassoon, the oboe players may start earlier, the bassoonists, but the reed making, sometimes they're starting as a senior in high school or as a freshman in college. And so you're still trying to, as my teacher would say, you know what we're doing now, don't you? And I would say, no, John, what are we doing? And he'd say, toiling in the fields.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it to some degree, there's still a lot of refinement that needs to be taught at that level. And Laura, like you said, that's kind of how I approach orchestral auditions. I mean, when I'm listening to candidates behind a screen, number one is, do they in rhythm? Do they have sound? Do they have things that I frankly won't have time during an orchestral rehearsal to attend to? If I stopped and tuned every single player, said the orchestra, we'd never past measure 2 of the piece. So you have to expect that musicians are going to come with a certain degree of kind of self-awareness and self-discipline to know that they should sound good, they should make a good tone, but it should also be in tune and the rhythm should be solid, so that they're not going to pull their colleagues left or right of the beat. But it makes a lot of sense when you say that you're listening for those kind of basic ground musicianship skills, and then that's your job, is to instill the refinement and side that you can continue to develop your ear and your technique to create a really beautiful sound. Tell me about music you've been listening to. Is there anything that you can listen to, Dana, that kind of keeps your groove, or it might even be classical music. Maybe there's, I know you said you had a big LP collection. What's your go-to, maybe just before you're about to have some dinner?
Oh, every day. It's just pretty funny because I don't necessarily listen to classical music for fun. I study classical music and I love Bach as my favorite composer by far. But if I'm exercising, riding, cycling for 40 miles or something, I'm going to listen to jazz and big band and stuff.
What about you, Laura?
I same like Dana. I don't usually listen to classical music for fun. My ears can't shut off, and I end up get critical listening. Then, but my husband listens to a lot of jazz, so when that's playing in the house, that'll be background music. Um, and I have two teenage sons, and 17 listen to music that I would never listen to myself, but I'm at peace with that. I will hear that often coming from his room. We were playing basketball the other night. Our brought out a speaker, and it was music that I'm not sure what it was actually, but it was definitely not something I would listen to. But I thought, I'm going to let him choose the music right now because I was so happy to be spending time with them, and so I'm pretty flexible.
What do you listen to for fun, Daniel?
Oh, well, I mean, I have to admit, I'm similar, particularly if I'm driving. I cannot listen to classical music because it's way too distracting.
Mhm.
And like Laura, I put on my critical ears and I just get like really riled up if I hear something I don't like, or I get so distracted if there's something that's really entrancing that I am not paying attention to what I'm doing. So I think like in the car, I don't even listen to music. I like to listen to a lot of talk. I'll listen to sports radio or something that I may not necessarily have a vested interest in, but it's just fun to listen to somebody who's really passionate about what they're talking about. And sports radio is ridiculous because they'll talk about things that nobody should care about, but but they do, and that's just fun, and it's a diversion. In terms of music, um, wow. I was an ersatz kindergarten teacher at the end of the semester because all of my son's lessons were online. So the school music teacher would come up with all these great songs, and she's introducing the kids to all these great folk singers from the '60s, and that wasn't part of my development. So I'm getting exposure to all these really interesting artists, and of course they're singing folk songs and children's songs, and it's really funny. But we kind of tease each other, and we'll make up words to the songs, and we'll sing the songs to each other, and just as a little homage to Mrs. Fire, his music teacher, who's a fabulous music teacher at his school. I wish I had a music teacher as good as she was when I was growing up, but it's really all over the place. And then of course the other thing that I'm doing just to kind of stay on top of my work is listening to music that I don't know that well. Pieces by composers that I admire, that I like, but I just don't know their work very well. I'm just trying to expand my repertoire and think about perhaps what might be coming down the road in the future. But I should let you both know and let our audiences know that we are actively planning for next season. We certainly have not given up on giving concerts next year. It will all be dependent on how many people we can put into a hall and how we can safely assemble an orchestra. So we're staying on top of those details each and every day. But we certainly don't want to dismantle anything at this point, and we are not planning on doing that. But it may, we may take some different formats, and we're looking into things that could be video or broadcast on television or simulcast on the web. But I really want to get the orchestra back together and playing. And if there's a way that we can do it safely, we're certainly going to do that. I feel really bad for the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra. They've already announced that they're going to forego concerts, or excuse me, opera productions all the way through the fall, which is kind of mind blowing to think that they will not have played since, March, and probably won't take the stage again until January at the earliest. So I can't even imagine being away from work for that long. And as you both alluded to, I mean, there's a real rhythm to the year and to our lives, particularly in the season when it cranks up end of August and finishes around middle of May or early June. And we're all out of that rhythm now. And that life rhythm actually gave a lot of structure to the way that I worked, and I'm sure the way that both of you work too. So finding a way to work some discipline back in there while also taking on a bunch of new roles here at home is I think that is the challenge for us all right now. But we miss you. We certainly miss our audiences. And I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you both. It's been really fun to get to talk to you and connect. And I just wanted to say that we miss you, and we want to get back on stage as soon as we can.
Thank you. We miss each other. I have just loved working with Laura and with you, Daniel, and I hope that our orchestra can be one of those cutting edge orchestras that, especially in the new venue, that this is the perfect time. We have lots of space,
That's
lots
right.
of audience space, probably lots of stage space, right?
Yeah. We can make the stage as big as we want, as big as a hockey rink if we want.
That's right. And your conducting can get broader as we're spread apart.
I better get back into shape.
That's right.
Oh, please. We just really need each other. We need music to bring, to heal people's souls, and we need each other. So I'm looking forward to whatever it is that we decide to do.
Oh, same here. I miss you both and everyone in the orchestra, and I miss playing live music, performing, and I'll do anything if it means I'm sitting in the nosebleed seats in the arena. The bassoons will be 20 feet away. We'll manage.
Yeah, we will too. We will figure this out. We need live music performed live again soon.
Yes.
Yeah, I think if anything has driven that point home more, it's having it absent, not having it in our lives, and realizing what a difference it makes to be in the same room with wonderful musicians playing wonderful music. I mean, it's a combination that you just can't replicate. Whether it's you've got a great stereo system or really hi-fi equipment, it's great, but it's just not the same as being in the same room with people who have dedicated their lives to doing what they do. So
it's really true.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us. It's been fun. And I brought my coffee.
Yeah.
It's cold now.
I've got one last cold swig. Here's to you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, take care, everybody.
Thank you.